flying in from Minneapolis and you start to look down and you see snow and snow and snow, and then you look a little closer and you can see, well, that snow's blown. So I could tell that it was windy, cold, and snowy here, and I admire you all. I really admire those of you who are here in short sleeves. Here I am all bundled up. But it's great fun to come out and visit with students of the law who intend to go on in their professional lives and be knowledgeable about how to deal with the laws, because there are just so many of them in our country today. How many of you are native North Dakotans? You? I know Tim is from Virginia, so you've attracted those from out of state too. Well, those of you who are from North Dakota have just seen an enormous change in this state during your lives, and that's one of the things we want to talk about today. It's always a privilege for me to be invited by the Federalist Society. I'm not a lawyer, and it's very interesting. During my tenure in the White House, I got to know the 3 young law students who started the Federalist Society. And I thought it was such a great idea that I looked for opportunities to be supportive of them and to get President Reagan engaged and involved in some of their work. And I've stayed connected to the Federalist Society ever since, and it's been a real privilege to see it grow and prosper. And I've really traveled all over the United States of America now to visit different Federalist Society chapters, and it's just wonderful to know that there are students out there who like to engage in this intellectual exercise of coming and learning new ways of thinking about things and debating issues and just growing yourselves. And so thanks very much. Well, as you well know, those of you who are been-heres and those of you who are come-heres, that's how we describe folks in Virginia, been-heres and come-heres, you know that North Dakota is experiencing this incredible energy boom. It really is world-changing. It has been world-changing, and I think it will continue to be. Fracking and horizontal drilling have made the basin more productive than even those who started in on the project thought was possible. And it certainly has changed the way people look at this whole area of the country and how the wealth that it has produced. Companies are thriving and the economy is booming in North Dakota, and we think of it as blossoming with opportunity. I don't know if you pay attention to such details, but North Dakota has the smallest unemployment rate in the entire United States of America. This is a good thing. This is a good thing. But as you see, you know, you've observed, when new energy sources are discovered, lots of questions are raised by lots of people, those who are knowledgeable and those who aren't knowledgeable and those who are happy about it and those who are worried about it. Some of the questions that come up are things like, do the companies that are doing the development of this resource, do they really care about the environment? Should we care about the environment more, or should we care about energy resources more? Is it even right to drill for oil? I mean, it's hard to imagine people thinking of some of these questions, but they do come to mind, and mostly they come to mind with people who have no understanding about the resource or what's happening there. But as you know, we live in important times and changing times, not only in North Dakota and the United States, but all over the world. And these times require us to deal openly and honestly with the questions that people raise. Well, energy and the environment go hand in hand. And new sources of energy and new ways to develop energy necessarily raise questions of how to deal with the impact on our natural resources and the impacts of the development of this energy product. How do we care for the environment when we need to use the environment to produce something that is important for our own personal development and for the development of our economy? Well, one thing that we can always do is look to the past. You know, I'm sure you've heard say that if you don't learn from the past, you're doomed to repeat it. Well, there are some lessons from the past that are very positive lessons that help us think about how to deal with things now. And let's just talk for a minute about the American frontiersman. The American frontiersman certainly didn't have much in the way of material goods. He generally had his family, a wagon, a gun, always a gun, some tools, and some food. He went out into the wilderness to look for and develop for himself and his family a better home, a home that he would build himself. He wouldn't go on the internet and line up some builder to come out or go to the local builder supply place. He had to build it himself. And when he found the land, he would make a decision to work the particular land that he chose to make it usable for himself and his family. That simple frontiersman would have to clear rocks and cut brush, build fences, plow the earth, hunt for meat, and a host of other tasks to make that land habitable and to make that land his land or her land. But when that process was done, that land was his. And he took pride in the land, and of course he, for the most part, kept it well ordered and healthy because it was his, but also because he knew that he had earned it. He had done the work necessary to make it productive, and he knew that it would have to provide for his family in the future. Today I would like to share with you a different view on the subject that we call environmentalism. Many people assert in this country today that conservatives, and I'm a conservative, that we don't really care about the environment, that we're just for development, regardless of what happens to the resource, that we just don't care. Well, that obviously isn't true, since conservatives have been around for a long time, but I would simply say that if one looks at the facts, one could see that that's not the case. There's no question about the fact that the most important thing that we have in common is we share the planet with each other. Conservatives and liberals and statists and socialists, we all share the same planet, and we know that it has to be healthy in order for us to prosper in the future. We breathe the same air, we enjoy the same parks, and we eat the same food generally. Fact of the matter is, conservatives simply want a system that cares for the environment from a very realistic perspective. We want our methods of dealing with environmental policies to deal with real life situations and be positive and beneficial for people as well as for the environment. We believe that the needs of our fellow human beings are the most important consideration that we have when talking about environmental issues. And we believe that there are effective ways and efficient ways to manage our natural resources, and there are more effective and efficient ways, but too often we think in this country we do things in ineffective and inefficient ways. We believe that there are positive ways to use our resources and use them in a way that will allow us to pass along to future generations a healthier, wealthier planet so that future generations can also prosper from the resources that we're leaving to them. So you might have in your own mind's eye an idea of what environmentalism is. After all, from when you were in grade school, you started learning about the environment, and you started learning about environmentalism. And most of you learned this right up through high school, and then you went to college. And some of you learned different things about environmentalism. Some continue to learn the same lessons you'd learned as a youth. But today I want to talk to you about free market environmentalism. These have been ideas that have been carried on for a number of years, but have never really been taught or thought about or spoken about in an organized manner. And we believe, we at the Heritage Foundation and myself personally believe that the principles of free market environmentalism are the right principles that we should learn and carry forward into our lives ahead, and not only in our country but in the world at large. because we believe it's the right principles, the right set of principles to protect and maintain our unique environment. And we think these are lessons that some of you may have learned, some of you may have learned them piecemeal, but they've never been brought to you in this set of principles that you can, I believe, take with you and use in your own lives, in your own careers, dealing with your own families in ways that will benefit people, your fellow human beings, as well as our environment and natural resources. We believe that any environmental policy in America should follow these principles because we think that the underlying fundamental grounding of our principles is in human prosperity and human well-being. We think that it's important that we have a set of principles. You know, America was set up by its founders with a set of principles. We call it the Constitution of the United States. The vision of our country is the Declaration of Independence, and what a great vision it is for a free people. But then there needed to be a set of principles that guided the way our country developed, and it was the Constitution of the United States. So we think that it's important to have a set of principles to guide us in different things that we're dealing with in life. And so this set of principles that I'm going to talk to you about today are the best set of principles that humankind can use to guide the way we live and deal with our natural resources and with the environment. There are 8 of them, and I'd like to walk through them with you and talk to you a little bit about them, and we'll have time for a rejoinder from your professor and then hopefully some Q&A. The first principle is really the most controversial. Some people, when I explain what this principle is, say, well, how can that possibly be controversial? And others of you will say, well, we don't agree with that at all. But the first principle is that people are the most unique, precious, and important resource. Not trees, not oceans, not air, people. And I would say that if you, when you leave today, if you don't remember anything else I've said, but you remember that people are the most important, precious, and unique resource, it will really change the way that you look at dealing with resource policy in the future. It's important that as we think about resources, natural resources, the key be how will this impact human beings? Will our dealing with this resource, will the manner in which we're choosing to deal with this resource, will it be beneficial for my fellow human beings? This is certainly the case with energy production, and one reason why we need to have more energy production. Energy is the lifeblood of economic development. And no matter where you live in the world or what line of business, what line of law you plan to go into, you will find that you need energy to make the wheels turn, to make the electricity run, to engage in the activities that you think will allow you to prosper as a human being. People, of course, are the ones that come up with solutions to problems that we face on this planet. Some people say, well, we wouldn't have any pollution if it weren't for people. I know that the people in this room know that's not the case. But we do know that's the case, that people come up with solutions to deal with environmental challenges that we've had not only here in the United States, but in the world. Our American public policy, North Dakota public policy, should always place human well-being and opportunities for human beings, human freedom, allowing humans to secure the blessings of liberty as its highest priority. Are we making the decisions that will allow human freedom to flourish and for human beings to enjoy the blessings of liberty? We know that human beings have the unique ability to transform their environment and to make it usable. The story about the American frontiersmen is one example of this. Since the beginning, human beings have struggled with their environment to make it useful to them. They've used their hands, but they've also used their minds to solve riddles that the land gave them. How do you get plants that grow that you can eat? How do you get fish out of the water? Seems like simple questions to us today, but as you think back in history, you know that these were challenges to human beings at one point in time. How do you make shelters that stand up to storms and actually provide heat and security and comfort from the weather that ravages outside? Well, as time has gone on, we know that human beings have come up with clever ways to solve these problems and other problems that we haven't even touched on today. People, for instance, just couldn't keep using fire to cook their food and to warm themselves. They needed better ways to get energy and warmth. And we know that as time passed, a variety of different solutions were developed by human beings to come up with solutions for these challenges. People have always had the ability to recognize a problem in their environment and then to find a way to fix it. And this is even happening today, and it will happen tomorrow and in the years ahead. When solving an environmental problem, what we do is we use the accumulated knowledge and ingenuity of people. Human beings are the creative force that takes resources that are not useful and makes them useful. There are so many examples of this, and perhaps we can share some of these. One that I like to use, and it comes from my experience in Virginia, where when you used to go into a sawmill, as you entered the sawmill yard, you'd see a pile of sawdust on one side that was just being piled there until it could get loaded onto big trucks and be taken to the landfill because it was a waste product. And then on the other side, you might see a pile of bark. Same thing, just piled up there until it could be loaded onto a truck to be taken to the landfill. In the meantime, you'd go into the mill and you'd see big trees being cut into beams and then 2x6s or 2x4s. And when you make that cut with that big saw, inevitably you end up with tiny little thin pieces of long lumber. And that too was considered a waste product. But then human ingenuity came along. Both people from within the mill operation and people who were on the outside coming up with new ideas came up with some ingenious ways to turn this waste into beneficial product. The sawdust, for instance. In Virginia, we had an entrepreneur who came up with a solution for making sawdust a useful raw material. He went to the grocery stores and he got all their waste plastic sacks. And then he got all the waste sawdust. And he developed a piece of machinery that you put all those two things in together with his own slurry and turned it into a liquid. And then he ran it through this piece of machinery that he had developed and patented. And out of the other end came something that was plastic lumber. And he turned it into picnic tables and outdoor furniture and wood for piers that wouldn't rot. And now it's sold everywhere, from Home Depot to the local lumber store. Outdoor furniture and outdoor lumber that doesn't go away in bad weather. He took waste materials and turned them into profitable material. On the other side of the lot was the pile of bark, and somebody else came up with the idea that if we take all this bark and chip it up and use our own slurry, we can turn it into chipboard and sell it and make money. And someone else said, well, if we take a number of these small slivers of lumber that have been left over from making big beams and big 2x6s and glue them together, we can make a nice big beam and sell it as well. All of these things were human ingenuity taking what had been waste products and turning them into something that was valuable. This ability, this resource, this human ingenuity is the most unique and precious resource available to us and to dealing with our environment. The second principle is that renewable natural resources are resilient and dynamic and respond positively to wise management. Natural resources are renewable by their very character. Wildlife, soil, water, marine life, and plants all replenish themselves. Wetlands, forests, deserts, and prairies all heal themselves from natural and man-made disasters. A wildfire may wipe out a forest, but the forest will grow back. A tragic oil spill may happen in the ocean, but bacteria in the ocean will break down that oil. Nature and its resources were designed to recover from disasters even without human intervention. All food, products, medicine, and building supplies come from nature. Nature's resources are obviously essential to human life, and caring for these resources is incredibly important. But we must recognize that nature is not fragile. We must not waste natural resources, but we must allow nature to renew itself, and we must look for ways to encourage that. And we must recognize that the repair cycle of the earth is quite powerful and intuitive. All living organisms produce waste. Nature has an innate ability to cleanse, to recover, and to recycle this waste back into the environment. Nature is not a fragile and static system that will be destroyed by human involvement. It's a vibrant and complex system that's able to adapt to change and to human use. And because of this inherent ability to cleanse and to adapt, nature can recover from calamities on its own, but nature can recover more quickly from calamities if we use that human resource that we have, the ingenuity, the knowledge, the science that human beings can learn and develop. Resources are not static and diminishing. They can be damaged. They can be stretched like a rubber band. But resources change every day, and they're dynamic, and they are resilient. And we can see that just by our own personal experiences. Principle number 3 is that private property protections and free market provide the most promising new opportunities for environmental improvements. You know, Americans, citizens like yourselves who work hard and save up and buy yourself a house, generally keep that house in pretty good condition and generally work very hard to make sure you have a nice yard. There's particularly a stark difference between the teenager's room at home and the young adult's first home. We take care of what we own. That's why applying the protections of private property to natural resources are good for those resources, because people take care of, to the best of their ability, what they own. They want to keep it in good shape. The other thing to keep in mind is that free markets work to solve environmental challenges. The beautiful thing about the free market system is an individual using their mind can come up with a new product or a new service and make it available in their own self-interest to others. And people who have a resource that need improvement look to the free market entrepreneurs for solutions to challenges that they have. This translates into something that can be good for the environment and good for a community. There are many examples of this, particularly in the agriculture community. It perhaps is not so noticeable in a state like North Dakota, which is so flat, but in Virginia, where you have rolling hills and rolling meadows, a farmer who wants to have inputs on their land to increase the yield of their crops sometimes puts a little too much down in one place and a little too little down in another place, and they have uneven growth of the crop. But technology has allowed them to develop pieces of equipment now that do applications using GPS systems and laser-based that measure the land and the slope of the land. And they're able to put just the right application down on that land, just the right application that that piece of land needs in order for it to produce the maximum yield for that farmer. The farmer doesn't want to put more on the land than the land needs to produce the best crop. So the farmer who wants to take care of his land and have a good yield is looking for the free market system to come up with solutions. And this is the case in many, many applications. If we can apply the principles of private property protection and take advantage of the free market to come up with solutions for environmental challenges, we know that we can have improvements to our resources and to the environment around us. The fourth principle is that efforts to reduce, control, and remediate pollution should achieve real environmental benefits. This may seem logical to you, but you would be surprised how many people in the environmental business think the way to improve the environment is to engage in meetings, usually at very nice resorts, lawsuits, more laws and more regulation, instead of actually looking at a problem and using good science and technology to come up with solutions. We need to make sure that as we're advancing laws and regulations, whether they be at the national level, at the state, or at the state level, they actually aren't creating more problems by having a one-size-fits-all solution that doesn't necessarily remediate the problem, but perhaps causes other problems in places that they did not expect. Today, we know for a fact that the worst polluters in our country are governments, and the federal government's at the top of the list. When you look for where the most polluted spots are here in the U.S., they're usually some government location. I don't know what the situation is in North Dakota, but I can tell you that in Virginia, every place the federal government had some activity, we would find that they had pollution problems. Every time we looked for a solution for pollution problems in the state, guess who wanted to be exempted from that law or regulation? Governments. The federal government, the state government, the local government. So we need to make sure that as we're coming up with solutions to deal with environmental problems, that we're making sure that those solutions don't necessarily satisfy someone's emotional desire to pass a law or a regulation or engage in a lawsuit, but actually are real solutions for real environmental problems, and that they're site and situation specific so that we can make sure that we're dealing with the environmental problem and the solutions that will work. Principle number 5 is as we accumulate scientific, technological, and artistic knowledge, we learn how to get more from less. I talked a little bit about this when I talked about the free marketplace. And there are many, many examples of this just when you look at everything just around you. Cars, for instance, get more miles per gallon. We get more board feet for lumber. Mines turn out more minerals. Obviously, we get more oil from the ground in many places where we use new technologies. Farms can produce more per acre. The more we know, the more human beings know, the more they can do with less. One of the great examples that all of you have experience with, even if you haven't thought about it, is the soda can. In my youth, if I had an empty soda can in front of you, I could barely dent it if I was trying to crush it. Today, a soda can is made out of aluminum, and so little aluminum that if we had an empty soda can here, probably every one of us in the room could not just crush it, but could tear it in two. Because the people who produce aluminum cans have two goals. One is they want it to hold the liquid, and two is they want to be able to stack it up. And they don't want to use any more of the resource than what will allow them to do that. It's scientific knowledge, it's technology, it's learning how to get more from less. The sixth principle is that management of natural resources should be conducted on a site and situation-specific basis. People who live in Washington, D.C., or people who have never been to North Dakota, they shouldn't tell North Dakotans how to manage their resources. The Environmental Protection Agency shouldn't make one-size-fits-all regulations guiding everyone in this country. Because what's going on in North Dakota today is quite different than what's going on in Virginia or Arizona or Alaska. The land is different, the soil is different, the wind is different. The people of North Dakota should be making decisions governing what goes on in the state. Site and situation specific is very important. And one-size-fits-all policies based in Washington, D.C. and made in Washington, D.C. are wrong-headed when it comes to improving the quality and condition of our environment. It's easy for the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. to make one-size-fits-all decisions. It's easy for them, but it's not necessarily good for the environment. And the principle should be making these decisions based on site and situation-specific basis. The seventh principle is that science should be employed as a tool to guide public policy. Science is very important, and science is very specific. When you do a scientific experiment and you're trying to prove it, you do an experiment over and over and over again, and you come out with the same end result. Science is not pseudoscience, where you announce that something creates a problem, but it's not proven in a scientific way. Science should undergird environmental policy. We shouldn't be making decisions based on pseudoscience, but we need to recognize that there are other things that come into play when making decisions. We elect people to office, to city council, to state legislatures, and to the Congress, because we want them to take into consideration all of the things that are important to benefit human beings. And so good, real science is important as a tool, but it should not dictate public policy. The last principle, the eighth principle, is that the most successful environmental policies emanate from liberty. Liberty is the single guiding principle that organizes all of these other values, principles, and policies that our country makes. It provides the driving force behind our society. And as technology improves, as knowledge improves, and as we personally improve, we seek to free ourselves from lots of limitations. Limitations you might be thinking about today could be gone in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years. We seek clever solutions to oppressive problems. And throughout human history, it has been liberty that not only has driven men and women to improve their environment, but has given them the opportunity to do just that, to improve their environment, to restore damages to the environment, and to make life and their community a better place for human beings to live, work, and raise a family. American history is rich with a culture of frontier cultivation, pioneers who explored the land and worked with it to own their own property and to make that property better and more productive. We have seen that example throughout our history. And we know that elsewhere in the world where there has not been liberty, for instance, in the old Soviet Union, this is where the most polluted spots on Earth are. This was a country where it was illegal to pollute, where the government controlled the manufacturing apparatus, where government controlled the inspections and the fines and the enforcement. And yet these are the most polluted spots on Earth because there was no liberty, no transparency. Even in third world countries today where there's not liberty for people to own property and care for